For those of you that are just joining us, we're going to be an in-depth look at the RME Babyface Pro. And let's just pull this up and get started. All right, so this is a nice shot of the product. And as you can see, it's been improved. This is the Babyface Pro FS, not to be confused with the earlier version, just normally called the Babyface Pro. This was launched in January of 2020 and has been selling very well right now. Some of the most common questions that I get are, tell me about the plugins that now come with it and tell me what's new as compared to the current model or the model that everybody knew. So there's new hardware, better preamps, and converters, and essentially it's pretty much reference class. What I'd like to do is highlight my cursor. It just makes it a little easier for everybody to see. Now, before we get into some of the details, one of the major differences between the actual Babyface Pro and the Babyface Pro FS is the SteadyClock FS. I got a question, is there an upgrade path from the Pro version? Yeah, you can send me an email and I'll talk to you how we can do that. That's here, I'll email you my email address and we can communicate after the webinar. So it all started with SteadyClock, and a lot of people ask about what is this FS technology, this SteadyClock FS, and now the Babyface has it, and why do I really care? Well, essentially, the FS technology, it stands for femtoseconds, but this whole idea of SteadyClock FS is all about capturing audio and playing it back, hearing your mix as it really is. And this is primarily because when we have to get into the weeds and the real technical of digital audio, that's where you can lose a lot of people. But sound quality is paramount when you're looking at an audio interface. So it's important to note that this stuff does matter, and it often can be the difference between why an audio interface sounds so much better, more transparent than something else. And in essence, this is what it is. So in digital audio, the clock frequency is an essential factor. It actually creates a correlation between the audio bits that are sampled and the actual time reference, the reference clock itself. And essentially, without this or a stable version of this, it will adversely affect the sound quality. And this can actually contribute to the expense of a product as to why converters and MicPres perform as well as they do. The reference clock is a huge part of that. And RME has invested a lot of resources and time and energy and research into this because they've made such very well known and very well renowned A to D and D to A converters, as well as they've been making orchestral MicPres. So for RME as a manufacturer, it's always come down to capturing the sound as it really is, nothing added, nothing taken away. So SteadyClock FS offers very low jitter immunity. Well, it has the highest jitter immunity, excuse me, and it offers very low jitter, and it gives the unit very good, or in this case, excellent performance in all the clock modes. And it offers an improvement to the A to D and the D to A conversion, and it gives you the best opportunity when you're making critical mixing decisions because nothing is added or taken away from the original source. So the benefits to you as a user of this technology, first thing you're going to notice is this FS comes from femtoseconds. So the reference clock is actually at a much tighter resolution than picoseconds. So you're going to have improved converters and MicPres. You're going to have an improved image, a sonic image that isn't going to have any degradation. The audio soundstage will have way more depth and clarity, and your recordings and mixes will be truly optimized as a result of SteadyClock FS. Now, let's talk specifically about the Babyface Pro FS. What's new, what's different, so that everybody understands. So the first thing is the hardware has been upgraded. So we've implemented SteadyClock FS in the unit. We've improved the mic preamps, the specifications, everything about the MicPres. We've improved the A to D, D to A converter, and on the headphone circuit side, we actually taken components from the ADI2 Pro, which has been a pretty much a renowned product unto itself, and it put that into the unit. There's some other subtle differences that I'm going to show you in some subsequent slides. In addition to the hardware, we've also partnered with Michael Scuffham amps, and included one of the best amp simulation plugins with this product. And this plugin can be used standalone or as a VST or AU plugin. We've also partnered with the Plugin Alliance, and specifically we are including Brainworx BX Opto Compressor and Brainworx BX Master Desk mastering tools. And these are lifetime, fully unlocked programs. So there's no gotchas, there's no subscription fees you got to pay later on. So when you purchase a Babyface Pro, you're getting all of this at no charge. It's probably hundreds of dollars of value just right there. So let's talk about the MicPres. These improved circuits actually feature a gain range of 76 dB, and it is a digitally controlled MicPre, adjustable in steps of 1 dB. So this is pretty exceptional right here. As I already mentioned, we've included components of the ADI2 series preamps. So we've improved the specs on the headphone outs. The TRS phone output has a 90 milliwatt total harmonic distortion has been improved, and it's just a great sounding unit, bottom line. Okay. In addition to that, on the bottom of the unit, there's a physical switch literally underneath the Babyface, and there's a new plus 19 plus 4 dBu switch. So it adds a direct way to reduce the output level. So it improves your signal to noise ratio for sensitive active monitors. It'll avoid distortion and overload. And with the TotalMix mixer, which we're going to demonstrate in a few minutes, it allows you to really have unity gain and all of your faders set properly. So that's kind of important. In addition to that, another improvement is both a USB 2.0 and USB-C cable are included, which makes this right out of the box compatible with current Macs and Windows machines, as well as older machines. So that's going to save you probably $100 right there. In addition to that, we also added a case slot on the right side, so you can lock it down so it doesn't walk or get stolen. And the last thing I want to show before we get into some demonstration is just the overall connectivity of the unit, because this gets lost. A lot of times when the Babyface is compared to other choices on the market, people lose sight of the fact that this unit is class compliant. It's probably one of the best class compliant audio interfaces you can get if you want to do professional recording on a class compliant device like an iPad. Also, it's 4 in and 4 out analog, not 2 in, 2 out. So you have 4 analog inputs. So you can add in a mic pre and very easily do just through the analog I/O. You can do 4 microphones with an external mic pre. But it also has ADAT and SPDIF optical connectivity. So you can use an 8-channel mic pre with ADAT light pipe and have a total of 10 mic inputs. And if you add another 2-channel mic pre on the analog side, you can do 12. So it's pretty powerful. Also, we include MIDI I/O. So if you're running out of USB connectivity on your computer, like a laptop, that's nice to have. So sometimes you don't have enough USB ports and you have to go out and buy a hub. So these are all the things that sort of summarize what makes this pretty cool. Now, what I'd like to do is show you a video that actually goes through the features and benefits of the included plugin. You see me right now switching over to TotalMix, and don't worry, we're gonna actually talk about TotalMix, but right now I'm just sort of setting up my connectivities so that everything works when we go back to the video. So right now I'm going to play this video. It's going to sort of go through the features and benefits of the S-Gear plugin, and then we're going to go and talk great in depth about TotalMix and getting around on the unit, both physically and with software. So, as you can see, that's a pretty powerful little bundle, and that's just one of the free software packages. So, some of the keys, and again, we're going to through a very in-depth demonstration and address questions and show the folks on this class exactly what they have questions about. So this will really depend on the features and benefits that you all want to see that I can take you through. But the keys to remember basically all of these hardware improvements that we discussed and the software included, in addition to the actual plugins. Of course, we have TotalMix built-in ability to do all the headphone mixing and EQ and effects, which we'll go through. And when you register your purchase at the RMEUSA.com website, you will receive an email back with the licenses and downloads, etc. And also, you'll see in those downloads, you can download some trial versions of Gig Performer and Piano Tech and Audio Blue, which is a really cool organ product. But this is a nice little summary of kind of what is changed from the previous model. Now, what I'd like to do is exit out of this presentation and show you kind of an overview of TotalMix and talk about not only the software side, but the actual hardware, the actual Babyface. So what I'd like to first do is just review the connections so that everybody understands when we're looking at the software, what we're actually looking at. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the RME website. It's probably the best place to show you this. So we're going to go to RME, and we'll go to the Babyface Pro product page. And the first thing you do when you get a Babyface Pro is download the drivers, and you can do that right here. You also can download DigiCheck, which is hundreds of dollars of free, high-quality metering software, so you can check your recordings and your levels and look at phase correlation and all that. And we go into great detail about DigiCheck in the TotalMix webinar that we do on Thursdays. We won't be doing that here, so just as a heads up. But you would download your driver right there, and you could see that will install not only the driver, but TotalMix. So your driver is this little icon you see on my task tray, and TotalMix. And this is true whether it's Mac or Windows. Now, in order to understand what you're looking at, we have two XLR mic inputs on the back. We have two XLR line outputs on the back. So that's going to be analog 1 and 2 in, analog 1 and 2 out. We have instrument 3 and 4 in, which also are line level. That's going to correlate to the inputs in TotalMix as well as on the unit. Then we have our phones out, which is considered phones 3 and 4. These are in parallel. These are separate outputs, but it's the same mix. So you have analog 1 and 2 out, phones 3 and 4 out. You have analog or mic in 1 and 2, and then instrument 3 and 4. And on the other side of the unit, which I'm going to scroll down, you have SPDIF optical or ADAT optical in 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 5 and 6, 7 and 8. And the same is true here. This power jack that you see is only needed if you're going to use the Babyface with an iPad, because the iPad is not going to give you sufficient power to bus power the unit. Otherwise, the unit is bus powered through the USB. Now, the reason I go through the physical is so when we're looking at TotalMix, everybody understands what they're seeing. So, of course, I have my unit set up the way I like to work, but I'm just double clicking and going back to the default names so everybody can see. So what you're essentially looking at here are the physical inputs, and my microphone is connected to the Babyface, which is why you see a level. So this is analog 1 and 2, and normally they're stereo paired like this, okay? And then instrument 3 and 4, which is also stereo paired. ADAT and SPDIF 1 and 2 in, 3 and 4 in, 5 and 6 in, 7 and 8 in. So by just plugging in a source and sending it audio, you will see meter movement without having to do a whole lot. Since the first two inputs, I usually like to separate them into separate inputs, and I also like to do that with 3 and 4. So that's what I'm doing here, okay? And we're gonna talk about the middle row and the bottom row as well. So there's my microphone input, and then there's a settings icon. It looks like a little wrench, and you can click on that, and you can use phantom power, pad, and then you can set your gain. You can type your gain in, or you can set it right here with the mouse. There's an effect send that will send my microphone either by using the mouse, or I prefer to use the actual fader, this little mini fader. And that will send audio to the effects, which I'm going to demonstrate in a few minutes. So analog 1 and 2, instrument 3 and 4, and the digital inputs. So essentially, all I have to do is raise the gain up. And if I open up a DAW, which I will do right now, I'm going to use Reaper as a simple example. And I'm just going to do new project. Like any good engineer, you just want to check your preferences and make sure everything is set here the way you want. And I'm just going to insert a new track and just show you how quick you can record. So literally go to input, mic input 1, because this is what it's going to show me since I have the Babyface set. So I have all these inputs, and I just record arm the track, and there I am. Notice in TotalMix, all I had to do is bring up the gain. I didn't have to know anything about anything else to get audio flowing fairly quickly. Now, let's put this GUI and what you're looking at. So your hardware inputs come in here. If I were to plug in an electric or acoustic guitar, it would show up here, et cetera, et cetera. The middle row are virtual software. This is where any software that you're using, and that would include a digital audio workstation, it would include your web browser playing YouTube videos, it would include separate applications that do audio, it would include virtual instruments, it would include individual tracks within a DAW. You can route your desktop audio, which is what I'll call it, into these middle faders and mix them along with any inputs. And we're going to come back to that. And then all of the hardware outputs, the physical outputs that I took you through on this unit. So that would be the physical outs here, the headphone outs, and of course the ADAT outs. They're all represented down here. Now you're going to notice it's the same names as the inputs, and the playback channels have the same names as the inputs and outputs, which unfortunately I personally don't like because it confuses everybody. I would have preferred this, say, software 1 and 2, software 3 and 4. A lot of people look at this and go, wait a minute, that name is the same as the input. I'm confused. Don't be confused. It's just the default, and you can rename it whatever you want. But you know where you are by just looking underneath. This is the software playback channels. These are the hardware inputs, and these are the hardware outputs. All right. So if I want to play audio from my DAW or my iTunes or Windows Media Player, it's going to show up in here. Okay. And depending on the settings of your Windows Sound Control Panel or your audio settings on your Mac, which is an audio MIDI setup, this is where you can choose that the sound will go. And that's why you see the little speaker icon. Now, if you don't go into the deep settings of that, it will always default to analog 1 and 2, which again is the name right here. So this is where my Windows sound or my Mac sounds are going to show up. And then I might route my DAW here and another piece of software here. Or within my DAW, I could actually send tracks directly in this mixer if I wanted to. And that would give me flexibility for creating specific headphone mixes. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the bottom row is your outputs. Typically, when you assign things to the control room section, they show over to the right. So when you first get your Babyface, it's going to look like this. You'll have your analog and your headphone outs right here. And you're always going to want to assign those to your control room section, not only for organization, because you notice it moved the faders over to the right, but also it determines what the talkback and the headphone mix features will be. So I always recommend ask yourself this question: what outputs, physical, do I want to be my main out? What am I connecting my studio monitors to? If the answer is analog 1 and 2, then you do this. The second question is, what do I want to assign my headphone mixes to? More often than not, it's going to be the physical headphone out. So I'll go assign phones 3 and 4. And you notice the analog phones faders just moved over to the right and got renamed. You can always go back to the default names by this nifty little feature here. And this is going to be the recommended setup for 99% of the people out there. There are other situations where you might use the optical outputs to feed a headphone mixing system, like a MyMix or something, and therefore you might assign the phones differently. But for most people, this is going to be the way it looks. Now, the way to get around in TotalMix, the very first thing you're always going to want to do is hear the microphone, right? You want to hear the microphone either in your headphones or if you're, if it's in another room, you want to hear it in the studio monitors. So the basic premise, what I'm about to explain to you, once you understand this, TotalMix is going to make so much more sense to you. Essentially, you click on an output. Notice it highlights. Also notice when I click on an output, it's shown under every fader as to what output I clicked on. So the basic lesson of the day is click on an output, the mix you want to listen to via that output. So I said, let's hear the headphones. So we click on the headphones. Obviously, we bring up the master fader. And I bring up my audio here. I want to pan it so it's in the left and right evenly. And now that's the mix to the headphones. If I was recording 2 vocalists at the same time, I might want to bring up the second mic into my headphones and create a mix that's got this microphone a little louder than this microphone. And that's my headphone mix. Now, if I want to create a different mix to the main out, which is going to my studio monitors, I simply click on the main out, obviously make sure the master fader's up, and bring up whatever I want to listen to here. And every time I click on an output, notice the mix changes. So that's the lesson of the day. Click on an output, create the mix, and that's the mix you're going to hear via that output. Okay. Let's talk about effects. The Babyface Pro has built-in effects. It has reverb and it has delay. Its primary design purpose was to set up headphone mixes without having to use plugins to do some basic cue mixing, which most people want when they're doing headphone mixes? A little reverb and the vocal on an acoustic guitar. You don't need to get overly crazy with plugins to do a simple headphone mix. And the fact that we can do it all here just makes it convenient. So in order to get to the effects, you just click here or you can click here. So I'm just going to click there and it pops up. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago there's an aux send. So we'll use my microphone. Notice I have the main out selected. So this is going to be what you all hear in this Zoom presentation. And I'm going to bring up the aux send, test 1, 2, and immediately the effect in registers my microphone. Now, we also have effects returns. So think of this feature as an aux send and return. All right. I'm going to bring up the effects return right here. Now you don't hear anything yet because I haven't turned it on. Test. 1, 2. So I can put on different delays and different reverbs. So I'll just go to a big hall. Test. 1, 2. And that's how we use the effects. We have echo. Test. 1, 2. And that's how you do that. Now, if I wanted to hear effects in the headphones but not in my studio monitors, I just do the mix over here. So I bring up the effects return, turn on the reverb, and now I have the effects in my headphones, but you don't hear it because you're listening to the main out. And that is how you get around using effects. Now, you'll notice that is what we call in the audio industry bus effects. So we can send multiple things to that one effect simultaneously. They're not individual and they're not unique. There's also what we refer to as insert effects. In the case of a Babyface Pro, the insert effects are EQ. Every input has EQ and every output has EQ. You can set up the EQ for monitoring, or you can record the EQ settings, and you also can record your dry input while simultaneously in parallel record the same input with EQ and effects on it. So if you're doing something in the headphones that you think you want to reference later on, you can actually record that mix separate from the track. So this microphone that I'm using, I could actually record dry and simultaneously in parallel on the same take record it with effects and EQ. So it's pretty powerful. And we're going to show you how to do that with a feature called Loopback. Now, before I continue, are there any questions up to this point?
Can we download this software without having an interface, or is the interface the key?
So let me answer that question with a simple you can, but it's my workaround. If you were to ask an RME professional, they would say, no, you cannot. But you can because there's something called TotalMix Remote. So the simple answer is TotalMix, when downloaded with an audio driver, is automatically installed. So let me walk through that a little more carefully. So when I download the driver for my Mac, it will also install TotalMix for me. That is the version of TotalMix that I use when connected to my computer, and I'm working exactly as you see me doing here. However, the question is, can I download a version of TotalMix just to play around with it without having an internet connected? The version of TotalMix that is installed with the audio driver will not allow you to do anything. In fact, you won't even get a window like you see here until your audio interface is connected. However, many people want to play around with TotalMix just to get comfortable with the features and stuff. So there is something called TotalMix Remote. You can download it from the App Store on an iPad, or you can go to the download section. Where is it here? Up here. I'm going off script here, so hopefully
I get it. I get it. I'm sorry.
I don't leave. No question. So there's a product called TotalMix Remote. I'm trying to find how to TotalMix Remote Mac. So if I download TotalMix Remote Mac, I can open up TotalMix. I'm trying to see if I have it even installed on my computer. Right. Yeah, I do. So I can open up a version of TotalMix Remote, which looks exactly the same as TotalMix. Of course, it's looking for host connections, and actually play around with it. But most people don't even think to do that. The idea is you got to have an audio interface connected in order to get
the general rule is, you have to have an interface. The interface is the key. Yeah,
exactly. All right. So right now we've gone through opening up the window, setting the gain, seeing it in your DAW, and recording. What I'd like to talk about is a feature called Loopback. All right. Loopback is a very powerful feature that, in essence, makes an output look like its corresponding input. Well, why would I want to do this? Well, for example, I mentioned software, okay? Desktop audio, Zoom, Skype, a video, iTunes, Windows Media Player, or some other FLAC file media player, I can route those audio channels here. But let's say I wanted to record those audio sources into a DAW. Well, why would I want to do that? Well, one of the most common questions I get is, how do I record an interview? And the interview is a podcast between me here, present with my Babyface, and somebody on Skype. Now, Skype is software, it's desktop software. And that audio from Skype is going to come in this middle row. So, how do I route this into a DAW? Because the DAW is not going to see Skype as a source. So the way that one of the purposes of the feature called Loopback is I can create a mix somewhere else on my mixer, and with the Loopback feature, make ADAT 1 and 2, as I have selected in this example, look like input ADAT 1 and 2, and then select that as my source in my DAW. Okay, so let's just show you what we're talking about. You saw me open up a DAW, insert a track, and just record the audio from my microphone right here. Now, if I want to record an interview, and since Steve is asking questions, we're going to pick on Steve. Let's say Steve, I say, Steve, you and I are going to do a podcast, and I'm going to call you, let's use Skype. So what I would do is I would go to my Skype software, which I'll pull up. And you probably notice with things like Skype and GoToMeeting and Zoom and all of these programs, you have very limited routing of audio. So I go to my audio video settings in Skype, and my only choice is the internal microphone or my audio interface, but it doesn't say which input of my audio interface. It just says Babyface Pro. And this is true of all programs like Zoom and Skype. You'll see the name of the interface, but you won't be able to say, well, I want to select my interface, but I want it to be input 3. All right. This is where Loopback's going to help you. So I select the Babyface, and then I want the audio, in this case, Steve talking to me over Skype, to go into the Babyface. And again, I don't have Babyface. Like, again, this is my middle row over here to the left. Okay. I don't see Babyface Pro 1 and 2, 3 and 4, or any of these. I just see Babyface. So those two selections basically mean that Steve is gonna hear me, and his audio when he talks to me is going to come in right here. And that's just because I've selected the Babyface Pro to be 1 and 2. All right, I can make it 3 or wherever, but most people don't even know about the configure speaker setting, and it'll just show up in 1 and 2 without them, almost by accident. So we're going to simulate Steve talking to me. How am I going to simulate that? I'm just going to play iTunes in the background, okay? So I'm going to make sure that you guys don't hear it. So I'm going to click on the main out, bring the fader down, and I'm going to click on the phones, and I want to hear it, but not very loud. Okay, so I'm gonna just do that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just pull up iTunes just to get some audio going, and I'll just hit play. And there's my audio from iTunes. Now you guys don't hear it because I don't have it brought up, but I'll bring it up just to illustrate. So I got that audio playing.
Sounds just like me, by the way.
Yeah, I sound just like that when I'm jamming. So there's my audio simulation of somebody talking to me over Skype, and I can name it Skype, right? And I want, I've already chosen the Babyface to be what Skype is listening to for an input source. So by using Loopback on 1 and 2, my mix of my microphone is going to Skype, which is why when I had the Skype app open, you saw audio every time I was talking. There it was right there, test 1, 2. So how do I record my microphone on a track and record Skype on a different track so I can do an interview and then go in and edit it later? Well, the answer is use Loopback. So I have all these other outputs over here to the left I'm not really using. So I could choose any unused output, and just for illustration, I'll choose ADAT7 and 8. So I click on ADAT7 and 8, and I bring up the microphone, and obviously bring up the master, and there's the audio right there. I'm mixing Skype right to output 7 and 8. By using Loopback, I now made output 7 and 8 look like input 7 and 8. And when I go to my DAW and insert a new track, I will select input 7 and 8.
It's
And
like a bus.
it's a bus now. There you go.
Yeah.
So there's my voice on track 1, and there's uh, in this case our pretend Steve on track 2. We hit record, and now we're recording the interview, and we've managed desktop audio very efficiently and very effectively in this scenario. And this would also be true for setting up a Zoom meeting like the one we're doing now. So, a lot of people who give Zoom meetings understand the idea of connecting an audio interface, connecting their microphone, but how do I play desktop audio? What if I have a PowerPoint that has music, or I want to do a multimedia thing? That multimedia thing is going to show up here. And if I mix that multimedia out to my main out and use Loopback, and I choose the Babyface Pro as the mic input microphone for the Zoom meeting, everybody is going to hear the mix. If I disconnect Loopback, then you're just going to hear the microphone input 1. But as soon as I use Loopback, this 1 and 2 out replaces 1 and 2 in, and now it's the mix that everybody hears in Zoom. So this is a very, very powerful solution for desktop audio management and doing things like Zoom meetings with multimedia presentations, and doing things like recording an interview over the internet using, say, Skype or using Zoom, even, because Zoom can come in here as well. I have my Zoom audio routed to my physical Macintosh speaker so that I don't create a feedback loop, because I want to mix music in for you all to hear. So it's a very powerful routing scheme. So that is the core, getting around on the Babyface, getting the most out of it. Over here, you have snapshots, which you can store and save snapshots of the mixer. So it's pretty self-explanatory. You have layouts, which are basically if you're using certain inputs and you never use other inputs and you want to hide faders that you're never going to use, you actually can do that under the options menu and go to channel layout, and you can hide things and create very streamlined mixing or mixer views if you want. And that just gives you workflow flexibility. So that's really what that's designed to do. And then, of course, you have your mute, solo, and fader group. So I can group faders together and mute groups together by simply hitting the edit button and just choosing something. And, if I wanted to do something like this, notice they highlight in red, and then you hit edit again, and now it's solid. And then I can activate it and bring it up. And there's certain times you might want to do something like that. So that's the basics. The last thing I want to show you in TotalMix before switching over to the Babyface hardware is this whole control room section is often underutilized and not understood. Yes, we moved things over to the right for organizational purposes, but also the act of doing that gives me control room features that I would normally find on a mixing console, such features as mute all the effects, mono the mix, speaker A, speaker B. I can set up a second pair of speakers, connect it to the headphone out or one of the optical outs, and then have a very simple A/B uh, speaker select switch built into TotalMix. So I don't have to go out and spend a few $100s on something that to just do speaker switching. Also, there's TalkBack. I can assign one of the mic inputs as a TalkBack mic, and then every time I click on this, that microphone is fed to whatever my headphones are. I have phase switching on here as well. So, products like a PreSonus Central Station and a Mackie Big Knob, and there's several other accessory products out there that are a couple $100s or more to do those types of things. It's all built into the Babyface. Pretty powerful stuff. Okay, what I'd like to do is quickly show you S-Gear. This is the software that you saw in the video that is a plugin or a standalone application. So I'm going to set up my window right like this, and I'm running the standalone application. So when you download S-Gear from the registration confirmation email, it will install in your plugins folder the plugin version, and it will install in your applications folder a standalone application. So the window that you're seeing essentially is all I need to go do a live gig. I use a foot pedal and can set up my MIDI to do preset changes and amp gain and all the typical guitar parameters I would want to play with as a live musician. And there are 5 amp types, which are named Duke, Steeler, Jackal, Wayfarer, Custom 57. But in essence, it's a Mesa Boogie, it's a Fender Tweed, it's a Soldano, it's a Marshall stack, those types of things. But they have cute little names here. There are effects like modulation effects, like chorus and delay. There's IR, impulse response, which is the key to it all, where you can set up different cabinets. You can set up the miking of those cabinets. So let's just say I wanted to go to a 1x12 and I want to use a ribbon mic, and I want to place that mic right here against the cabinet and get a certain sound. And I can do the same for a second cabinet and do stereo cabinets or a mono cabinet. Very powerful. I also can export and import other impulse response settings from other software applications that do amp simulation. And I have delay as well. So I have a delay thing, a modulation thing, which is basically chorus and flange, and then I have a room thing, which is my reverb. And then I can play around with where they are in the signal path. And then I have my main I/O controller, amp A, amp B, volume. I have a built-in tuner, which you saw. And then basically in the settings, I can set my audio device to Babyface Pro, choose my buffer setting. I'm getting a round trip latency of under 3 milliseconds, which is amazing. I can take the input from the instrument input 3 on the right hand side, and I want the stereo output to go to 5 and 6, which means it's going to show up right here because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that's how I set it up. And it's very, very simple and very, very powerful. And it's normally $130, and you get it at no charge. The plugins for the compressor are another several $100s. So for $8.99 map, you're getting a Babyface Pro, you're getting plugins, you're getting TotalMix, you're getting DigiCheck. And now I'm going to switch over to my webcam and talk about the Babyface Pro just as an actual product all by itself. What do I mean by that? Well, the Babyface Pro, as you can see, is pretty portable. It's cast aluminum, but it's a standalone mixer. You can use the Babyface without even connecting it to a computer. You can use the USB to, like, your little USB to power adapter that you plug into the wall to charge your phone, or you can get an external power supply from Synthax, and they'll mail it to you, and it's a locking power supply. But I can use this as a standalone mixer. So when I talk about $8.99, you got an audio interface that's state of the art. You have all these plugins that are state of the art. You have TotalMix and DigiCheck. You also have a standalone mixer. So to me, there's no comparison between this choice and every other choice, because every other choice is only an audio interface. As soon as you remove it from a computer, it doesn't do anything, has no value to you. So let me show you how to get around on the Babyface. And this is true whether it's connected to the computer or not. There's my mic input. This is my input section, and this is my output section. I have input button, output button, and I have a rotary encoder, which works as a gain and volume control. I have a select button, and I have a dim button, which works exactly like you'd expect. It will dim the output. So if the cell phone rings and you want to dim the audio, you just hit the dim. So how do you get around? Well, let's start with the output, because that's the most obvious. You might not be able to see it very clearly on the webcam, but this is labeled channels 1 and 2. This is labeled phones 3 and 4, and this is labeled optical. So remember that output row in TotalMix? This represents the main out. This represents the headphone out. So if I wanted to control my headphone volume, I just hit toggle the output button, and it just switches between those 3 things. So I choose headphones, and now I bring up the volume. And now the volume's louder. If I want to make the volume softer, obviously I bring it down, but I'm going to go to the main out. This is what's feeding all of you. So I can ride the output and change the level. Test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. So very quick, very easy. You don't have to grab a mouse. It's almost like a controller built in. Now you're probably thinking, all right, well that's all well and good, but how do I use this as a standalone mixer? How do I set things like gain and do a mix between what input is going to the main out? Same idea. So I have channel 1 and 2 in, which is the two physical inputs on the back. I have instrument 3 and 4, the ones on the side, and I have the first two channels of the ADAT optical or SPDIF. So the first thing is, how do I set the gain? Well, you simply select the input. So I'll just do input 3, hit the select button, and it highlights where the gain is. And now I can control the gain of that input. If I want to control the gain of the microphone that I'm talking to all of you on, I just simply go to the input 1 and 2, hit the select button. There's the gain. Bring up the gain, test 1 2, test 1 2, test 1 2. If it's getting too hot, bring it down. So I'll leave the gain where I had it. If I want to go to input 2, I just hit select button again, and now it's highlighted. And let's say I want to ride the gain of both input 1 and input 2 simultaneously. Notice I hit the select button a third time, and now I can keep it relative. That's how I do it. The last feature is creating a mix. You notice there's a mix button. So the way you do a mix is you choose, I'm going to do a mix to the optical out just so that it doesn't affect the mix that you're all hearing. So I go to the output that I want to do a mix for. So let's say I want my microphone that I'm talking to you on, which you can see right here. I want to mix that to the optical out. I hit the mix. I make sure the input that I want to do is selected. I hit the mix button, and now the mix button is selected. Hit the select button, and now I can bring up the gain or the mix to the optical out. Now you notice there's no level going over here because I never turned it up. Test 1 2. There's my output. I can also do panning with the set button and pan it left or right, doing the same procedure. So you can see it's a very versatile audio interface to do what we want to do. Are there any questions on that? All right. So what I'd like to essentially do is leave the last few minutes to sort of address any questions, or if there's anything that I haven't gone over that somebody would like to know. This would be the time to either chat it to me or ask. Don't be shy.
Hi, Derek. I have a question.
Go for it.
So, what's the best way to set up like a one button push to toggle between headphones and monitors for tracking and monitoring? So, in my home studio, what I do is I send the phone's output to a headphone amp. And sometimes I just want to hit one button so that I can go from headphones to monitor and back.
Mm-hmm.
And just wanted to know what the easiest way to do that is.
So these would be routing and mix settings that we need to quickly toggle, right?
Correct.
Okay. And so one mix is set up where you have a mix going out the headphones, and it's a certain set of faders that are up that feed the phones, correct?
Correct.
And what's the second scenario that you want to switch from or to?
It would basically be the same. I just want to toggle between sending to monitor or headphones.
Okay. There's a couple of features you want to know about, and you can decide which one is the way you want to go. So the first one is, let's say you have a mix going on in the monitors, like you see me clicking on right now, and you really like it. You can right click somewhere on this fader and copy the mix, and it also says mirror. I'm going to explain the difference. Copy means take a snapshot of whatever the mix is, and let's put it in the headphones. So I'll just right click and paste. Paste submix from main. And now this mix and this mix are identical at this moment in time. Now all I did was take a snapshot of the mix and put it on the phones, but that's it. If I make any changes to either, then they're obviously going to be different mixes from here on out. Now another feature, and I'm going to get to your question as far as toggling. Another feature is right click and do mirror. Immediately they both are highlighted. What that did is every mix, everything I do is being done for both the main and the phones. So if you have a studio situation where it's always like, well, I just want to hear what you're hearing, so I like the mix you got going on, so can you just put that in my headphones? Well, this would be a great way to do it. And you can just mirror. So every change I make over here is being fed to both the phones at the same time. Now, if I want to remove that, I just right click and do remove. Now let's address your question. A couple ways to do it. You can do it with snapshots, or you can do it with workspaces. Now, workspaces are everything. The look of the GUI, what faders are highlighted and which ones are separated in mono versus stereo. You know, do I like to leave the EQ panels open at all times on the mic input? Some people like that, right? Like I have it here. You can even shrink down faders really, really small by hitting these little arrow buttons. And you can, I think you can use, I think it's the option key or it's the control key that will do all of them at once. I always forget which one that is. And so all of that plus the actual mix is saved with workspaces. And I can hit the W key and on my keyboard and this comes up and I get 20 very quick select for workspaces, or I can just do a file save as and load. Now, snapshots are just the mix settings. So if you wanted to create a mix for the main out, and let's just say you got a lot going on. You got your microphones are hot, you got guitar and bass coming in, all right? And you got a mix. And it includes effects and everything. And you can save this as a mix. So I'm going to hit store and I'm just going to save it right here. And I'm going to call that mix, maybe headphones mix, right? And then I want to create a different mix or I want it to be in the phones. So right now, if I do this, and I don't want to mute it because you guys won't hear me if I do it, but basically I would get rid of the mix in the mains and maybe copy the same mix over right here and then store that here and then make this one and then I could toggle between them. So as long as I store the mix I want when I want it in the phones and then unstore it and then put it in the mains, and then I can toggle between them by just clicking these two buttons.
Yeah, and I'm using snapshots, but I don't think I copied from one to the other, and I think that's where my mix-up is because every
Tell you
time I
what,
click on
a better way for me to exemplify this will be to use some outputs that aren't going to affect the Zoom meeting. So let's pretend this is main out instead of this, okay? So I would create a mix. So let's do this more realistic. So there's my mix of what's going to the main out with maybe some effects, all right? And I'm going to store that. And of course, all of this would be zeroed, you know? I'd bring it down and I'd get rid of this. And of course, this wouldn't exist either. So I would save that as the main mix. And then when I toggle between it, that would be the fastest way to do it. And then, of course, in my phones mix, I'd get rid of that and zero all that out, clear submix, store that as my phones. And now I'm toggling between the two mixes. That's the fastest way to do it.
that makes sense.
And then if you have a setup you like, you can save it as a workspace, which will also save those snapshots. So you can go to an available workspace and do save current. And that's the way I work. And then if I have another way I want to work for tracking, where I always want these open. I don't want to see any of these ADAT inputs because I never use them. I'll hide those. And I don't want to see any of these because I'm not using them. So I'll go ahead and on the output section, hide all of those. And this is the way. And of course, you know, I could shrink down my GUI as well. I'm just drowning out the background on my desktop. And now I can do workspace by hitting W and save it here. So now every time I want to switch between these, I can just do this. There's where we were. This is where I want to be for tracking. And notice it came up with the EQs ready to go. So those are very, very convenient.
Yeah, I didn't know about that shortcut. I was getting tired of going up to the menu all the time. But yeah, I do save the workspaces as well.
Yep. Great question. Any other questions?
Thanks very much, Derek. I appreciate your time.
Oh, no problem. And if anybody has questions that they're too shy to ask, you can also, I'll send everyone in the chat my email. You can feel free to send me an email, and I'd be happy to address it or refer you to Jeff Peterson if we need to. All right, well, if there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
Hey, thanks a lot, Derek. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.